The 2021 MLB season is here, and although the seats may not be full, your bankroll has the chance to be. Greg Hoops Peterson has you covered for every game, every day this season, along with comprehensive analysis and angles for getting to the window while celebrating the walk-off winners and blown saves of what will be a wild season. Now it is time for the Baseball Betting Podcast with Greg Peterson.
A warm up from below. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for the Baseball Betting Podcast. Myself, Greg Peterson. Got a great podcast for you. We welcome on in the second segment the old man who bets, Geoff Sheasby. We wound up doing this prior to the conclusion of the Yankees versus Red Sox game, but we take a look at all the divisional series along with doing a nice little deep dive on the wild card. He's going to be talking about some of the teams that he does like with regards to their World Series odds. We're going to be talking about just these divisional matchups and how some of these teams might be able to fare and whether you should be maybe going a little bit more series based or if you should be going a little bit more game by game based. So we're going to have a nice chat there with Geoff. And then in the final segment, going to give you guys a sign total on every game on the betting board for this Wednesday, which is one of them. In a little something I like to call a touch of all. It's just natural reaction. It's like, oh, there should be 15 games, but in reality, there's one. But with that said, we also do now know that it's going to be Corbin Burnes against Charlie Morton in Game 1 of the National League Divisional Series. So I'll give you guys my initial thoughts there and then provide a little bit more on Friday as well. So we've got that. I would give you a little bit more when it comes to the Divisional Series, but White Sox have yet to settle on a starter, and the Boston Red Sox, as I'm coming onto this podcast, just took down the New York Yankees. So we'll have those picks on the podcast tomorrow, so I have no fear there. And this is a podcast that is dedicated to two things: making you guys money and just making you guys more informed about baseball betting in general. So if you got a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, one of two ways we will fire those in. First one is my Twitter timeline at G_1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. Then from there, you're able to fire whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did get in a question today, so let's dive in.
So you have questions, and Greg may or may not have any insight into them, but let's dive into the Twitter mailbag.
We get this one in from Thick Spreads, and you're able to follow him on Twitter at Spreads, and then the word thick spelled THICCC. He asks at G_1, does your podcast break down the valuation of home field? How much does that differ, if at all, compared to the regular season home field advantage? And I really think that the numbers are the numbers when it comes to home field, and it's just very relative because with the Milwaukee Brewers, we're going to be talking about this with Geoff, the fact that they have been a very good road team and their home run differential is like 100 runs lower than it is on the road. So you don't necessarily have as much when it comes to Miller Park. I do think that there's a little bit more of something when it comes to home field advantage when it comes to the playoffs, because also keep in mind that towards the beginning of the year, you had some very empty stadiums and things wound up filling back up towards the summertime as well. So that is something that is taken into account, but you do have some pitchers that they're absolutely dominant at home and not so good on the road. Luis Garcia is probably going to be pitching at some point for the Houston Astros. Textbook example of that. If you would have had the Cincinnati Reds in the postseason, you had an extreme opposite in Tyler Mahle, who had a north of 5.5 ERA at home. Meanwhile, on the road, going into his final start against the Pittsburgh Pirates, his ERA was sub 2. So I think that it's really a case-by-case basis, and there is no set way of being able to do home field advantage when it comes to baseball, because unlike an NFL field in which it's 100 yards no matter where you wind up going, no matter where you wind up playing basketball at, the hoop is the same size, the court is the same amount of length in feet. You don't have that in baseball. You've got the grass cut a little bit differently on the infield in some spots. Obviously, the weather is going to vary, and you have that when it comes to football, but when it comes to baseball as well, the fences are out at different lengths, which means that you get some ballparks like Miami that are very pitcher friendly. Meanwhile, if you're gauging the Colorado Rockies the exact same at home versus on the road, then I don't know what you're doing, because obviously you're playing out there in elevation, and we wound up seeing their home and road splits towards the first half of the season. So it is always of consideration. Trust me, when I do my podcast, I typically will point out the home and road splits of these specific pitchers. If we wind up seeing something demonstrative with regards to record, I always make sure to point that out as well. So I do appreciate the question. Now let's take a look back at how the New York Yankees wound up getting completely walloped by the Boston Red Sox on Tuesday, as we do a little bit of a recap of that, try to find out a little bit more of the Red Sox, and just take a look at them going into their series against the Rays, which will be starting up on Thursday.
What happened yesterday? Let's go around the bases and find out.
6-2 was a final, and this was a game in which, if you wound up betting this total, if you like the under like I did, hopefully you took it early because they wound up opening up at 8.5. It got down to 7.5 in some spots, so if you like the over and you wound up taking the 7.5, you wound up getting there as well. I had this pegged at like an 8.1, 8.2, so I liked 8 over, I liked 8.5 under, so that was solid there. My New York Post play of the day of the Yankees, well, that went down in a fiery heap of smoke. For those of you guys that did wind up having the over of like 7.5 or 8, you'll be happy to know Giancarlo Stanton wound up making you some money as he wound up getting a home run off of Garrett Whitlock, and then Anthony Rizzo wound up having a home run that it looked like was going to spark a rally for the Yankees off of Nathan Eovaldi, because then you wound up getting Aaron Judge on base, and then Phil Nevin stupidly sent him around third base into home when the game was 3-1, and the real unraveling for the Yankees, though that was bad, it was Garrett Cole. He had absolutely nothing in this game. He gives up 3 runs over the course of 2 innings, including a pair of bombs going deep for the Boston Red Sox. Xander Bogaerts and Kyle Schwarber as Anthony Eovaldi. He gave a really good start. 8 strikeouts, so his strikeout prop wound up going over 5 1/3 innings, gave up 1 run. Ryan Brazier, 2/3 of an inning, scoreless. Tanner Oak, Enzo Robles, both give you a scoreless inning, and then Whitlock gives up that home run. Meanwhile, for the New York Yankees, their season is done after Luis Severino gives up a run out of the bullpen in 1 1/3 innings. Jonathan Loaizaga gives up 2 runs in an inning. Chad Green gave you 5 outs, and Clay Holmes wound up giving you 2 scoreless. But now it's a Boston Red Sox against the Tampa Bay Rays, and the Red Sox are 4-11 in their last 15 games against the Tampa Bay Rays. I really felt going into this game, whoever wound up winning would just be pretty much roadkill to the Tampa Bay Rays. There's nothing I saw in this game that makes me think otherwise, but certainly a congratulations to the Boston Red Sox. And hey, depending on your number, overs and unders are both 1-0 in the postseason as of right now, and obviously underdogs are 1-0, and home teams are now 1-0 trend-wise. So that's what we wound up seeing in Major League Baseball yesterday. Now let's take a look at these divisional series. We're going to also talk about the Tampa Bay Rays a little bit in general, as myself and Geoff are very high on them. We, like I said, wound up doing this interview before the conclusion of Yankees versus Red Sox, but going to have a good chat about the MLB postseason with our good friend, the old man who bets, on the other side right here on the Baseball Betting Podcast with myself, Greg Peterson.
Greg is calling in a pinch hitter from the Overtime Network hotline.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for the Baseball Betting Podcast. Myself, Greg Peterson. It is great to be joined by our guest, as it is the old man who bets joining me on the podcast. He does a terrific job when it comes to just gauging a little bit of everything sports betting. I know that he is very nervous as I do this podcast because we're doing this during the Yankees versus the Red Sox broadcast, but with that said, he does a terrific job over there at 1:37 p.m. I know that he does quite a bit of podcasting. I know that he does some work with DraftKings as well. This is a man that also out there on Twitter wound up posting up a little bit of a power ranking when it comes to all these playoff teams. We're going to be diving into that and so much more, as we do have Geoff Sheasby joining me on the podcast, and you're able to follow him on Twitter at Easy Enough, old man who bets. And Geoff, it is great to have you aboard. Thank you so much for joining me.
Greg, thanks so much for having me as always, man. Great to be back. You said it. I've got my Aaron Judge jersey on, for better or for worse. It's the playoffs, and this one I think is going to be an absolute roller coaster.
Oh, I'm right there with you. And I do think, just going with the Yankees versus Red Sox scene here, whoever winds up winning this game, they are going to be up against it with the Tampa Bay Rays, with the Rays. I take a look at them and I see the best team in the American League right now, just with how balanced they are. You got a guy in Kevin Cash who I do think is the best manager out there in baseball, and we've just seen it throughout the regular season. Both the Yankees and the Red Sox wound up having their struggles with the Tampa Bay Rays. So I think regardless of what winds up happening on Tuesday, whoever is a winner is going to be up against it against the Rays.
Yeah, man, I unfortunately agree, again, as a Yankees fan. But, when we're looking at World Series futures here, Rays plus 750, that was on DraftKings Sportsbook, was one that really jumped out at me. And we talked about run differential here. They're number 3 in the league in run differential right there with the Giants. They're at 206. Giants are at 210. The Dodgers, of course, a league of their own at 269. But it seems like they kind of check all the boxes, right? Great run differential, although an alarming home and away split, plus 142 at home, only plus 64 on the road. So something maybe to keep an eye on there. But even across the board, when we're looking at pitchers and the starters here, pretty okay. Starters is probably their weakest spot in terms of the 10 teams in the playoffs. ERA number 9 at 4.08. In August and September specifically was at 4.3, which was 10 out of 10. But, I mean, they make up for it with a great bullpen. You know, this is a bullpen that cumulatively had a 3.24 ERA. So it feels like with that run differential, I know they love their openers. They love to get creative. Feels like a team that can really give other teams, I think, a very tough time, especially at that plus 750 number.
And we always talk about the bullpen of the Tampa Bay Rays. How about them being the number one team in the big leagues with regards to runs per game during the regular season? So got to give it up for them, as you've got to give it up for the LA Dodgers. But apparently the league doesn't think so, because what is the reward of the LA Dodgers for winning 106 games, going over all their just obscene win totals, having a tremendous year despite Dustin May going down early, the terrible situation that we wound up seeing with Trevor Bauer? List goes on and on. A one-game playoff with a St. Louis Cardinals team that right around this time last week was on a 17-game win streak. You've got Adam Wainwright, who's going to be going for the Cardinals, and Matt Scherzer, who's going to be on the bump for the LA Dodgers. And right now, we're finding the Cardinals as a $2 underdog. I do certainly think that the LA Dodgers should be a favorite in this spot, no question about it. But if you're giving me $2 with the St. Louis Cardinals, I'll take that all day. I don't know about you, but I think that there's value here on the Cardinals, even though I do think that they should be the overall underdog.
Yeah, man. I mean, pure comedy that the Dodgers are in the wild card game, right? And again, run differential, 269, plus 269. The next best team was the Giants at plus 210. So the best team in the league by 59 runs. Like, that is like the Grand Canyon size chasm there. And then you look at the Cardinals here. They're only plus 34 on the season. That's a 235 run differential between these two teams. That is absolutely insane. And, you know, it's a perfect combination of, like, do we trust season data or do we trust the last 45 days? If you trust the last 45 days, almost impossible not to back the Cardinals, right? So you said 17 in a row, absolutely insane. But, you know, one thing that I did think was really interesting, and it might not matter for this first round, because obviously the Dodgers are at home, but the Dodgers were one of two teams here in terms of home run differential and away run differential, where they were just absolutely dominant on both. Plus 143 at home, plus 126 on the road. The only other team that got even close to having that kind of even split was the Astros at plus 100 at home and plus 105. Meanwhile, we got our Cardinals here, minus 7 at home, plus 41 on the road. I guess that's a little bit of upside that they rally away from blue, but I think it's going to be an uphill battle for this Cardinals team. Kind of obviously.
It is absolutely insane that we've got what we're going to have going down in this one, as we do have Geoff Sheasby, a.k.a. the Old Man Who Bets, joining me on the podcast. And whoever the Giants wind up drawing, whether it be the Cardinals or the Dodgers, I think that it is going to be intriguing, because we did see the Cardinals play very well against the San Francisco Giants during the regular season. As we all know what happened in that Dodgers versus San Francisco Giants regular season series. The Giants won the regular season series by 1 game, and a lot of that is because Mike Tauchman wound up robbing Albert Pujols of a home run in one of those games, or else the Dodgers would have gotten that win, and it would be the Giants right now in the 1-game wild card. So it just goes to show you that all 162 games are very meaningful. But you take a look at the other end of the spectrum between the Braves and the Brewers, and I do think that this one is going to be intriguing, because I think whoever winds up winning this series, whether it be the Dodgers, the Cardinals, or the Giants, they're going to have a little bit of a tough time with it, in my opinion. I was higher on the Brewers prior to a few weeks ago, but I've not liked what I've seen out of Freddie Peralta since coming off the injured list. 3+ runs given up in 4 out of 5 starts since then. The loss of Devin Williams and Jake Cousins from that bullpen have certainly been glaring for them as well. And then with the Atlanta Braves, I question their frontline starting pitching as well. So I do feel like whoever winds up coming out, whether it be the Giants, the Dodgers, or the Cardinals, they've got a good path to the World Series, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, man. The Braves at plus, 1,100 right now to win the World Series. Doesn't feel great. Braves versus Brewers, run differential within the 10 teams here, number 6, number 7. So a bit of a wash there. Interestingly enough, for this Brewers team, they were only plus 4 runs at home, while plus 110 on the road. I don't know what we make of that, but that I think is wildly, wildly interesting. And I think you bring up a really, really good point, Greg. Obviously, Devin Williams punches a wall celebrating our postseason berth. You know, I'm not even going to get into how absurd that is. But when we look at these starters here, I think there's a lot of uncertainty kind of outside of the top of the rotation, but that doesn't necessarily matter for this Braves team. This is a starting rotation that through August and September, of the teams left, had the third best ERA, the fourth best expected FIP, and their bullpen got it together. They were the fourth best of these 10 teams in terms of ERA, and the bullpen at 3.29. Their expected FIP doesn't look as good, almost a full run below that, indicating a regression. But in these small samples, that might not come. It's the type of thing where they kind of got rid of AJ Minter, sent him to AAA. He's a fine sixth-inning guy if they need him now. But Maztek and Luke Johnson have gotten it done. Closers are gotten it done. When we come into the bullpen here, maybe we see starters coming out of it. So it's one of those things that I think it's hard to quantify. But in that wild card game, I definitely like the Braves. And I think one point that also kind of helps solidify that, if you're looking for, one swing to change a game, this Atlanta team is number 3 in home runs per game, only behind the Blue Jays and the Giants, where this Brewers team is number 18th in the league in terms of home runs per game. So if you need one swing to change things with a bullpen that's been overperforming, that's hot, with a pretty good starter, I think the Braves are definitely the move here, especially considering, are the Brewers at home? I think they are, yeah?
The Brewers are going to have home field advantage in this one, and I do give the Brewers a little bit of an edge overall for this series right now. You're finding that series price right around minus 145, and that feels about right. It's one that I really wouldn't advise either way. If you're looking at either side, I would look at a little bit more of a game-by-game sort of betting style in this one, because I do think that you give the Brewers a little bit of credit, especially with having home field advantage, but at the same time, certainly is going to be a fascinating series, as we do have Geoff Sheasby, aka the old man who bets, joining me on the podcast. And when it comes to just your handicapping in general, when it comes to the postseason, I know that there are quite a few people that they fire in on futures right away. I've been advising on this podcast, if you're looking to do futures, just do a little bit more of the rollover mentality on a series-by-series basis. I personally do a little bit more just game-by-game personally, but how do you wind up just gauging the postseason in general when it comes to your betting?
Yeah, I think definitely lean towards that game-by-game mentality. And Greg, just one last point on that Brewers. You talk about their home field advantage for them. Again, their home run differential is only +4. Away is +110. So playing more games at home, could that somehow hurt them here? I don't know. I think it's an interesting angle. But, coming to a handicap style, I think it's one of those things that we have 162 games worth of data, almost 163. So, I think the numbers are obviously going to be as accurate as they can be. We've got peak motivation. Everybody's rested. So it's one of those things that I think you could trust the data a little bit more, especially the last month or so's data and performance as potential outcomes. So I'll occasionally throw a series here. Maybe I'll do some gambling and put in a World Series winner, and liking some of those +700s. The Giants, the Rays really stand out to me. Don't hate the White Sox. I don't really like the Astros at +450, neither here nor there. But yeah, I'll do some gambling on some futures. But in terms of profit-making machines, sticking to my guns on the game-to-game level.
And I do agree with you on the Astros at +450. I don't think that there's a lot of value there, but I do like them in their first series against the Chicago White Sox. And I think the big reason why is because we've seen the White Sox really struggle with teams that have had a record above 500. We've also seen it with the White Sox. The fact that they wound up having a losing record at home, and I just honestly don't know what to expect out of Carlos Rodon and Lance Lynn, because both of these guys have been a little bit banged up. Lucas Giolito as well. They looked better when they wound up making their last start or two of the regular season, but those guys wound up only going about 5 innings. So I do think that there's a little bit of mystery when it comes to the front-end starters, when it comes to the White Sox. And we all know with the Astros, this is a team that just feels like year in and year out, they always play their best baseball in October.
Yeah, man. I mean, spot on. Doesn't matter how down the Astros are, they seem to finally get it together. And I think that White Sox starting rotation there is such a good call out. We're looking at ERA ranking of these 10 teams. For the full season, these White Sox were number 4. Coming into August and September only, that balloons to number 7 out of 10 here. So they've definitely seen some woes here. And that bullpen kind of looks the same way. Number 5 during the regular season of these teams, that is ballooned to 7. Their XFIP still remains low, but nonetheless, not one of those times that you need to bank on a positive regression. You want the numbers to be exactly what they are, which I think is obviously important. And I've seen some consensus on Twitter that, they've only played a certain amount of games with their full healthy staff. Now they're as healthy as they can be, at least from the bats. But you look at a guy like Eloy, I mean, yes, he helped me get to my fantasy playoffs and ultimately win it. But the last 30 days, this guy's hitting below 240 and he's only hit 2 home runs. So I get it that batting average doesn't really matter, but when you're also not hitting dingers, that is a major concern. So even at full staff here, yes, on paper they're loaded, but will all of these injuries throughout the entire season, kind of hurt their rhythm a little bit? I don't know. I think there's a lot of uncertainty there. So of the +700s, yeah, I get the upside, but I prefer the Giants and the Rays, knowing that we've seen what they're going to give, and that product is very good.
No question, there is a lot of uncertainty when it comes to a lot of things that we're going to be seeing in the postseason. But one thing that is a certainty, Geoff Sheasby always being able to deliver a great interview on this podcast. Geoff, I know that you're doing some great work over there at 1:37 p.m. I know that you're doing some great podcasts. I know that you do one with the Odds Fellow as well, so you've got that going on. I know that you've got a bunch of written work. I know you're also a man that you dive into the NFL, college football, give out some picks during the weekend when it comes to all forms of football as well, and have been having a good year with that. So let the good people at home know they're able to follow you on social media and just everything that you got going on in general.
Yeah, Greg, I mean, thanks again for having me always. Always such a good data-driven conversation. I appreciate that. I love the shout out of, anybody you could grab a beer with. Would absolutely love to make that happen, whether I'm in Vegas, you're coming to New York. We'll definitely have to sit down for at least one cold one. But you can find me anywhere, man. At Old Man Who Bets. You said it, NFL to NFTs, ice cold beers to Screamo. We do it all. I try to keep it fresh. The account is just unapologetically me for what I want to put out there. Thankfully, people stick around for the bets. Do some work. Short-term, high volatility investments drops every Thursday. Podcast. Need to get you on that once we start having guests, hopefully in the next couple of weeks with the Odd Fellow, as you said. And that's just sports plus data, hopefully equaling profits. A little bit of work with DraftKings, sell T-shirts. It is what it is. A little bit of this, a little bit of that. And as you know, bro, man, it's always a great day for a great day.
Yes, sir. And I've got first round if you ever come out here to Las Vegas. I certainly need to make that. Perhaps even second round as well if you're willing to say for a round number 2. And then when it comes to short-term high volatility investments, that podcast, you're able to find that wherever you wind up getting this fine podcast as well. Geoff does a terrific job with that, along with our good friend Anthony Latino, aka the Odds Fellow, and it is always great to have Geoff on this podcast. So big thanks to the Old Man Who Bets, aka Geoff Sheasby, for joining me right here on the Baseball Betting Podcast. And coming up next, we do have a big one with regards to the National League Wild Card game coming up tonight. So going to give you guys my side and total on that game on the other side, and a little something I like to call Touch 'em All.
Welcome back to the Baseball Betting Podcast with Greg Peterson, as we're off to a quality start, and now it's time to walk it off in a grand fashion.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for the Baseball Betting Podcast. Myself, Greg Peterson. A big thanks to Geoff Sheasby, aka the Old Man Who Bets, for joining me in the last segment. We've got one wild card game for today, but also we now know who's going to be pitching game 1 of the National League Divisional Series between the Braves and the Brewers, so I'll give you guys that. The White Sox are still a mystery, and since the Red Sox and Yankees game just got done, as I'm coming out of this broadcast, we really don't know what the Red Sox plan of attack is going to be quite yet, so I'll be having those picks on the podcast tomorrow, but going to give you guys a sign total on this National League game wild card and a little bit of a preview for Braves versus Brewers game 1 here in Touch 'em All.
If a game is listed on the betting board, Greg has a side and a total on it, so it is time to touch 'em all.
Going to be going with that wild card game first, and then we're going to give you a little bit of a look at Friday's National League Divisional Series game between the Braves and the Brewers, and I'll be refreshing this on the podcast Friday morning, so have no fear there as we dive into 9:39, 9:40 on the betting board, as the St. Louis Cardinals going to be hitting the road to face off against the LA Dodgers, and Adam Wainwright is going to be going for the Cards. Meanwhile, Max Scherzer on the bump for the Dodgers, and the Dodgers are the biggest favorite we've ever seen in a wild card game in history, of anywhere between minus 217 and minus 240. Meanwhile, if you're taking a look at the Cards, anywhere between plus 185, and I'm seeing as high as a plus 205. 7.5 is your total. The over and the under are anywhere between minus 105 and minus 115. I could have played it safe. I could have given the New York Post the total because I like this total over. I set this total at an 8.1, but we're going big here. We're going with Cardinals on the money line. Anything above about a plus 170. I officially set this at a plus 172. I was willing to take the Cards. We're getting $2 here. I think that this is tremendous value. You've got a Cardinals team that at this time last week, they were riding a 17-game win streak, and Max Scherzer, he has been terrific for the Dodgers. The Dodgers are 11-0 in his starts. He has given up a combined 11 runs in his last 2 starts. I do recognize that one of these starts came at Coors Field, but he's been figured out a little bit more. Adam Wainwright, I recognize that 2 starts ago, he had a rough one in Milwaukee against Brewers, bounced back, had a nice start in the next one. You've got 2 great veteran pitchers, and with the Dodgers, they do have the number 2 bullpen with regards to ERA in the big leagues. Alex Vesia was able to step up for this team, along with guys like Justin Brule, Phil Bickford and company. But I do take a look at the Cardinals, the way that Giovanni Gallegos has been able to close out games. You take a look at what you've been able to get out of someone like a Luis Garcia. Kwon Young Kim has been able to come out of the bullpen, and I do feel very secure about that. With the Cardinals, you got a pair of guys with north of 30 home runs. Tyler O'Neill along with Paul Goldschmidt, who have really been able to emerge, and Nolan Arenado has been a good concept for this team as well. Obviously, with the Dodgers, you've got all their bats as well, as you've got all these guys that have been able to give you at least 20 home runs, and pretty much all these guys are hitting at least at 250 aside from Max Muncy, who's hitting like at 249, as you've got Justin Turner down for what? Trey Turner down for what? Mookie Betts. You're able to throw in there Chris Taylor, AJ Pollock, Will Smith. So you certainly have some nice boppers there, and I've got to say, Corey Seager is right now is a man possessed. Over the last 3 days, this is someone that's hitting at 375 with a 455 on base, but I just take a look at the St. Louis Cardinals. They've been able to play relatively even up throughout the season series. This is a bunch in which they've been able to do very well on the road recently as well. With the Dodgers, I do think that they should be a favorite in the spot, but you're giving me $2 with the St. Louis Cardinals. I'm going to take it. We're going to ride Adam Wainwright. We're going to ride that playoff experience. I'm going with the Cardinals, and I'm going to be going over in this spot as well. And then, like I said, with the White Sox versus the Astros games, as of right now, we don't have any decided starters there. The Red Sox wound up just winning, so I'll have those picks on the podcast tomorrow for Game 1, but here we go, 9-19, 9-20 on the betting board. The Atlanta Braves in Game 1 of the National League Divisional Series at the Red face off against the Milwaukee Brewers, as one Corbin Burns is going to be going for the Brew Crew, and one Charlie Morton is going to be on the bump for the Braves. I pull this one for Bet Online because they and DraftKings are the only two places that have a line on this game. Both of them have a 7. Your under juice is anywhere between minus 110 and minus 115. The over is anywhere between minus 105 minus 110. Bet Online has the Brewers at minus 132. DraftKings has the Brewers at minus 155, plus 135 at DraftKings on the Braves. Meanwhile, plus 122 at Bet Online. I set this out at a 7.2, so if I'm getting a 7 here, I'm going to be taking a look at the over. I wound up setting the Brewers as a minus 148 favorite right now. If you're looking at run lines, which I probably am not going to wind up taking, you're finding the Brewers at plus 145 at DraftKings and a plus 163 at BetOnline. So if I were out there on an East Coast jurisdiction, which being part of VSiN, I can't bet at DraftKings anyway, a little bit behind the curtain there, but I would be just waiting on this one. If I were getting an offshore number like we're seeing right now, I would be taking a look at the Milwaukee Brewers, because up until Corbin Burns' last start against the LA Dodgers to round out the regular season, the Brewers had not dropped a single one of Corbin Burns' starts ever since the All-Star break. And you just take a look at Corbin Burns. In my opinion, he is the rightful winner of the Cy Young Award. His walks per 9 rate is hovering right around 2. He has been masterful. Now, he's actually been a little bit worse at home than he has been on the road. 285 home ERA, .94 road ERA. That is something that we were talking about Geoff Sheasby, the fact that you've got a Brewers team with right around a plus 100 run differential on the road compared to just 4 at home, but he has been lights out no matter where he's been. Burns at home, 3 home runs given up in 88 and a third innings. Opponents throwing at 220 off of him. His strikeouts per 9 rate, that is right around at 12.6. Then you take a look at Charlie Morton. He's actually been a little bit better on the road than he has been at home, and I will say actually quite a bit better. 306 road ERA, 361 home ERA, and 15 road starts. He's given up 4 home runs, 12 home runs at 97 and a third innings, given up at home, and opponents throwing a $185 off of him. You take a look at both of these bullpens, and I do think that the Brewers are going to be locked and loaded with their bullpen. Brad Boxberger having a really, really rough go of it is something that is of note, but they've got Hunter Strickland back in the fold. Brent Suter is someone that actually led the Brewers in wins. We talk about their starting rotation, and their leader of wins was Brent Suter with 12, so he's been able to do a solid job. And then you take a look at Tyler Mazik. What he's been able to do for the Atlanta Braves has been absolutely tremendous. Richard Rodriguez has been able to come and give this team some good innings. Chris Martin has been a little bit shaky for this team, but you take a look at Luke Jackson, .98 ERA. You've got a whole bunch of guys on this Atlanta Braves team with at least 30 home runs as well. Adam Duvall, Austin Riley, Freddie Freeman, Ozzie Albies. So they have been able to do their job. Dansby Swanson, he's hitting about a 250 with a 311 on base. But then you take a look at the Milwaukee Brewers as well. When Willie Adames is out there in the fold, this team wins about 66% of their games. When he's been out of the fold for this team, the team is 500. So Willie Adames really is a cheat code for the Milwaukee Brewers ever since he was traded for. He has been absolutely tremendous. hitting about a 285. He has been able to go deep for the Brewers 20 times in just 99 games, so he is the X factor. Luis Urias has been able to do some nice things as well. 23 home runs. He's hitting right around 250. Avisail Garcia, 29 bombs for the team. Eduardo Escobar, I think, is going to be able to step up for this bunch as well. So I do take a look at this spot, and I'm going to be setting the Brewers as a little bit above a minus 145 favorite. I've got them officially as a minus 148 with Burns versus Morton here in game one. And like I said, a 7 or lower, I'm going to be taking a look at the over. 7.5 or higher, going to be taking a look at the under. And that will wrap things up for the Baseball Betting Podcast on this Wednesday. A big thanks to Geoff Sheasby, aka the old man who bets, for joining me in the last segment. If you like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, the Baseball Betting Podcast with Greg Peterson, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you've got a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you've got one of two ways we all fire these in. First one is my Twitter timeline at Geoff_1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review, and I'll be coming at you guys every single day throughout the baseball season, which means coming at you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in.